So I am looking at a few different things. At least let me maybe put this in full screen. That's sufficient. Um, that would be fine. So I was prompted by something that I experienced recently that attributed to the shape of water and how it manifests into various types of music. And the focal point in my interests, anyways, had to do with shoegaze music that spans the last 30 years. But a part of this was trying to also understand some of the geometric implications of soundscapes that are connected with the shoegaze genre. So for a while, I was looking at the symbolism of various works poetically that are defined within the lyricism of shoegaze pieces, and connecting that to certain classical frameworks. So this is generally what this has to do with in a fusion. So I will say the first point of interest is with time. This aligns with a Deleuzian concept that connects with cinema, these cinematic characterization. So this is a means to move beyond the mere representations of movement. The idea was to show a more direct correspondence, if not a linear recognition for representing some form of movement that is connected with musical expression. And this is certainly something that is not necessarily non-trivial, but so in this case, we say that there is a direct presentation of time. The notion of time in this Deleuzian sense composes a continuum variation. And the Bergsonian case, there's this notion of duration, of course, that aligns with the, as a description for movement in cinema. So some nascent expressions, they consider this form pure optical and acoustical situations. An idea, of course, that I was focusing on throughout was just trying to determine a focal point for the situational aspect of acoustical expression that has a fairly multi-layered subjective feel, and also trying to interpret what those feelings were as they have a sort of fan-like or modulus of different facets. For instance, it means to expand or progress beyond what is initially observed. So moments are of profound change in a diegetic element of film. So I think of film generally, I suppose I will stop there and sort of illustrate as a way to frame or at least parameterize different events or entities or circumstances, situations otherwise, for a concept of sound that occurs throughout time and in a passage or process. So I would say that in some classical works, there is definitely an impasse or so that is expressed, say, with an adagio, or we'll use that as a functional example of an emotional expression, but it varies, and there can be perhaps in a certain case some kind of difference of how this is addressed, or at least as it represents different kinds of emotional change or modes. So time, of course, in this case, does build on the Deleuzian notion of image. Excuse me when I close the door. And so the notion of image, there of course is this crystalline image of time to evaluate the continuum of changing events. This throughout we suggest a kind of foliation, like I see, for instance, in the formation of flower petals, for instance, and some other natural phenomena, a kind of connection that is, in this example, perhaps a chaining of exegesis. Something external to what is initially observed or perceived. So there is a natural perception of spatiotemporal extended entities that is connected with this. Entities in sound are thus defined with respect to motion. And I would also say perception and in sound, they may suppose that entities are isolated from motion. The support is connected with the Deleuzian notion of cinema. In Bergson, in 1895, there was this notion of snapshots of passing reality. This is a kind of a connection, say, with the parametrization or a narrative kind of cinematic expression, a way to build a dramaturgy, or a way to source an emotional content within. Perhaps the eisegesis may be more connected here. So I would say that yes, in time and motion, there is a correspondence. Dance and movement as representation of feeling in time. This notion generally bridges throughout musical works, and they promote movement or instill an activity that preempts a kind of moduli. So the moduli is a source of the multiplicity for perception of entities that occur in motion. If we look at Husserl, we can consider the all consciousness as consciousness example, which is more of a qualification of multiplicity or sustaining of it, as opposed to defining the product for it, which may be singularity. So when we see phase space, we could define the sort of path between multiplicity and singularity, perhaps. So when singularities are points, when something happens according to multiplicity of some event or a collection of events, this is evident. They are collectively described as an emotional conduit in phase space. However, emotion, as far as in representation of this work, it is more or less a manifesting of rippling effects or moduli that express this. So physical multiplicity can be defined in this way. And the argument, of course, would be perhaps connected with phase space, that is a transition of emotion codified into musical themes and motifs, which is very much a broad tenet. I think I have, yes. Okay. So phase space, in this case, is a realization of Shoegaze that is singularity for natural phenomena. And this is connected with the notion of shape of water. So dance representative of Shoegaze music incorporates this subtle movement while showing a progress or prolongation of emotional texture. This is not in particular specific to this era of music. And in fact, in the past 30 years, maybe lacking in evidence. We can certainly see this sort of relationship or representation to natural phenomena that exists for quite a number of years. In fact, we could suppose a millennia might be fair. So an aquatic or flowing liquidity of form, for instance, that is representative of the following expresses singularity over complex tapestries. And this is described as an immersion of moduli that pervades a timeline that is tangible. So in the modern shoegaze vein, a few examples that I would consider these few works, although it does seem to be very much more deeply expressed. And these are more or less just considered tangible works that seem to illustrate or connote some form of fluidic expression as it relates to kind of a natural phenomena in a certain particular case. And so each of these would be characteristically different in feeling, and the feeling of natural phenomena that is at a lower tempo cycle. The lower tempo is spatial, this getting a wholeness of form over a moduli. So I think Yeah, okay. So branching generally will be described in this particular kind of illustration of a moduli. So this is essentially just showing a center point that may be the singularity, or as I will later describe as the perfect circle of fifths. But I will say that in this case, of course, we'll say that flowing outward and onto the surface reminds of branching multiplicities. In the picture, we have the branching multiplicity when M is 2. This is a flow of natural phenomena going from the gray disks and moving left and counterclockwise. This is considered sequential, but one would wonder specifically, is this a movement, physical movement that is protracted from the space of music and its form, and as far as how the human form relates rhythmically to what is being performed or played, and there is a subjective impetus to this, or is this a combination of or collectivity of sound that follows a similar tenor or motif, and that the symmetry, especially in this case, could be evident and may share a kind of a singularity or a kind of compactness. So I went back again, so flows in circle packs. This will be illustrated further, but the particular case, of course, was looking at shapes of water and trying to capture the form of the geometries of bubbles as they form and the rippling effects, and what this could mean tonically or sonically in different cases, as far as how it could correspond to a different kind of environment, even if there is a kind of radical translation. What is the question ontologically? So this is an example of a univalent circle packing that is not globally univalent. And this is described in a particular case, especially in this project, as a kind of emergent space for musical processes. So we suppose that the image captures the motion of the Deleuzian multiplicity through a soliton wave, basically through current propagation. This is essentially what this is, and then we could refer to the current propagation of waves in shallow water through the Korteweg Davies work, which is simply providing a kind of a different kind of emanation of spirit, perhaps, as far as the illustration of shallowness and the sonic quality of that in Shoegaze in particular. Let us see. The modular music generally would suppose this being evident. In one aspect of this work, I'm considering the ferrate tessellation. So this goes with the line. It aligns with the circle packing idea. So I want to see, for instance, how circles specifically that are cycles of sounds can be defined in Euclidean space or are defined as Euclidean circles, and how there is each sound being universal or univalent has a center at infinity. And when we have a full collection of sounds of all possible emotional directions representative by sounds, do we have can we prove a singularity which aligns with some multiplicity for all the whole collection of sound? So and in this case, will we say that we have for all events or motifs of music, would this also connect? I don't know. But can we suppose that in another aspect, when sounds are produced at a center, when we have this idea of a horocycle, in the example presented, would this circle packing be a way to extrapolate more information from seemingly nuanced or nascent sonic qualities, or those that are overpowered, perhaps in an encumbered but noisy environment in some case, an open system, I should say. So I would say that in general, yes, we have another point to make about modular music. So if we look at groups, modular groups, we can express a kind of temporality according to edges of some tessellation. So we can suppose that generating a set, if we have a generating set anyways, it is defined according to a pair of emotions, for instance. So according to a singular set of entities, these are linearly defined. That is, if I can project a sound according to some kind of labeling. And that is all based on I guess, a rather feeling about what is happening more directly, if that is correct. Perhaps in some way an assemblage of labeling may apply. So if I have Euclidean diameters, maybe I can look at lambda lengths in a moduli, and I can say, well, why is this important? It seems fairly ambiguous. So we'd say that all music is a decoration of some moduli in an argument here. That is a suggestion for taking pairs of events in a Deleuzian phase space, and that represents some different chordal structures. For weighted edges, for instance, in some emotional feature of music, there's a notion of a hyperfan, for instance, and this takes from very loosely the idea of sieve theory from Xenakis. So suppose we have a collection of sounds for some triangle that shares a vertex, or some length of connections, or a length of, I guess we wouldn't say length of something viable, a collection of sounds that are related in some way. That would be described perhaps depending on where the sounds come from as a lambda length. So this is an example of a hyperfan. So let us suppose that we could extrapolate more sounds from a core. Well, in this case, it is a synonymous term to employ, but we'll just say that there are variations on a theme, for lack of a better word in this case, that are expressed over some time, although time in this case is not directly expressed. But we could also say that the emotion, especially in shoegaze music, amounts to a softness, which is very much evident in the tradition of that genre, that collects a full continuous notion of sound. This is corresponding to a concept of feeling music that is not specific to one genre or era of music composition. Of course, the process of duration does apply. To endure feeling in music, especially in the scope of Bergson's duration, is an imaginative space or domain. The domain here is free-flowing moduli theory, but the cusp for multiplicity of feelings is extracted according to some time, which feeds into the phases as transitions idea. So the thing is that, of course, the notion of duration in Bergson was not quantitative, so most of the construction here would be a contradiction of the argument. But anyways, so in general, we have music, and this, of course, is the circle of fifths. We have the ideal musical notes arise in taking perfect fifths, frequencies in 3/2, from C going clockwise around and outside the circle of fifths. That is from C to G, G to D, and so on. So generally, this is where we have that. So snapshots of chords. We have Sunday's Goodbye, which this is merely a kind of partial illustration of what I suppose may be a feeling response from some of the introductions. So general structure, capturing rhythm and flow until the 56th bar when a percussive crash sounds. 40 Days, of course, has a crashing element. I will say that representatively well, in this case, of course, the crash is considered a floating immersion, at least in its in the way that it's presented. The LSD in the Search for God, starting over, has a strong tremolo and vibrato, and this is fairly noisy. The note variation of the intro is aquatic feeling. So anyways, this is essentially where we see each of these that can convene in some kind of format, very generally. I suppose this could be almost n-dimensional. We can say that simply because there's a lot to say. Even from the standpoint of deconstructing sounds from a certain sense. So universals generally do arise in this case in the future anyways, in the notion of spheres and musical harmonics that were proposed by Pythagoras and Aristotle. I draw upon the musica universalis, taking sound from the cosmos, for instance, which is to some extent applied here. Boethius had the musica, which had the three principal categories of music, as indicated here. The sounds made by singers and instrumentalists seems to be definite in interest, but a lot of these are fairly unpredictable, situational, random events that comprise a universal construction. And the spherical component of this, I suppose, will illustrate, and this is very much in sync with that, the Ebenezer Sylvia astrology work or illustration that connects with the Universalis piece. So this is another thing, spheres, that I'm sort of beginning to develop a bit further in a more practical setting. So we can say that there might be a universal cover for various types of music influence and sound. For spheres, I may suppose the following, say, of course, this being evident in two spheres that are in a real space and for some domain. So the distance between the center of one sphere and another sphere is essentially two-dimensional real space over some domain. And this exists for any of these. The domain is called Ford domain. And this is represented here in the dotted circles. The Ford domain is the entire picture. So what I would say here is that, well, what are we saying as far as amplification, intensity, vibratory response, phenomenal impact of an event when we are in the center of something, of some environment or atmosphere, and what in particular is the relationship with this? And say shoegaze, classical music, anything that is emotionally responsive or perceptive in some sense, and what is in some sense when we talk about moduli, a kind of swarm effect that arises when surrounded by various influences that are fairly unpredictable or random upsurges or so that connect with a tableau of various sounds and feelings that correspond to them. So of course this is a further sort of zooming in of what this is. Suppose that each of these zigzags we see contains geometric information about the sounds according to 3-2. And what I would say is that, well, if that is the case, then we have a kind of a movement or so towards the center of one of these circles. Would we be able to project outwards at any given section of the circle to extrapolate a new sound? Something like this. But what is the feedback if this happens? And what is the phenomenological aspect of this in some sense? So this is something that can be evaluated, but also I would like to wonder how intense can the zigzags be? Can they pivot? Can they move? And can there be some rather anomalous attributes? So the hard lines in this case depict the angles of some canonical tetrahedra for a motion of sound that is an emergent phase space with respect to the perfect fifths. We can notice a geometric center via the Ford domain that is the central object, the cycles of perfect fifths and various motifs and times. The face of the fort is not a blue oval. I suppose it's comical to say that, but instead is this. So AB and we see this basically as the segments, as you can see in the picture. And the angles denote the change in tempo and associated sonic quality that represents urgency or duration for some sound. So this is perhaps considered frequency change. In a particular case, as far as my my involvement is about, it is about trying to measure or qualify the sound of bees in particular, and bees they buzz, or they perform what is called a waggle dance, and they buzz at about 266 hertz. That is usually when they are in close contact with a source of pollination, source of nutrition, however it may be. That is C sharp, but the depth, the frequency change, for instance, with bees is not that dynamic. In fact, it is either 25 hertz or 266, and there isn't really any space in between. So I'm wondering what the stepping change or differential might be, a dynamic state change, or however it may be described, that connotes urgency or duration, and also relates to a more intense zigzag in the Ford diagram, in this case. So Ford is further illustration. Ford domain can lift to a hyperbolic space, as we can see here, I guess we could say. But this is saying that if we have triangulations that run over geometric centers of some hemisphere, then we have some kind of true multiplicity that is viewed at at infinity, since it is a projection along the faces of the Ford diagram. So that is sort of an idea that I would think may apply. So the faces that I would say are musically human, or I would say anomalous, or they're unbounded in some sense. So they appear to be scapes, but more of a natural phenomena influenced sound, or causal aspect of it. So a collection of circles tangent to all sides is considered the Ford circle. So I would say that very much in perhaps a primitive sense, we would say that these are considered ripples. But when I listen to some shoegaze music, and I hear even a correspondence, a softness that is presented, that perhaps reminds of a kind of chord progression, tonic shift, for instance, in some classical works that evoke tension, but in some other works it does not. It perhaps is a perceptual clarity that I could see through the circles, of the Hurrell circles in this case. So yeah, I think that I've reached the end of my slides, actually. So that may be all I have.